wanted to do a series of videos where I have conversations with folks who are interested in tiny houses, simple living, those kinds of things. Because I know a lot of folks have a lot of questions. And, I was talking with Jack here, and Jack reached out to me after I think you purchased one of our ebooks, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of initially how we got connected, and he had a few questions, and I said, hey, would you mind hopping on the video here? So Jack, you want to kind of introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, Ryan, thanks for having me on. Got a handwritten thank you, and I thought that was nice, and saw you're from Charlotte. I just moved to Charlotte. I'm 23 years old, just moved here 4 days ago, and I've signed a lease here for about 18 months, and I'm looking at the next move. I know it's a little premature, but want to plan it, and I'm interested in tiny living or some level of tiny living. So really appreciate you hopping on a call and answering questions and discussing your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, 18 months, that's actually that could be a good time window for you to kind of figure out what you want to do and then start to execute. I know when I was building my tiny house, it took a lot longer. It took about a year. It took about 8.
Totally. I think the worst thing I can do is rush myself. The best thing to do is do the legwork early and take it.
So I guess what are you? It sounds like it may be a tiny house, maybe something a little bit different. What are you thinking?
Admittedly, I'm not the most original person. I saw that the box pool that Elon Musk lives in. I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay.
I consider myself a nomad, a pseudo nomad, so something like that. That's 400 square feet. A lot of I'd say a lot of the building is taken care of, and maybe getting around that compostable toilet. I've never stayed in a tiny house. I'm a little. I feel like I can commit in my head to something like that. Tiny house a little bit. There are a lot of things, a lot of intricacies that it'd be a lot of getting used to. So I don't know exactly what I want to do. I feel like exploring everything, and I've spent the last couple months really researching, watching videos, reading blogs, reading your book about whether it be dealing with the city, whether it be hooking up water utilities. There's a lot that goes into it.
There is a lot, yeah, and I think it can be for someone stepping into this, it can be a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, right? Like there's just so many things to consider. There's a lot of questions that come up, and then it seems like, especially in the beginning, each question just begets more questions, and it's probably it's tiresome, I'm sure, or it gets overwhelming at times for some people. So maybe let's take a step back and say what is it about this lifestyle that appeals to you, and what are you ultimately trying to achieve, right? Because if you're trying to build a life in a certain way, a tiny house may support that. You said boxable, is that what
yes, that's what first piqued my interest.
Yes. So a boxable might be the way, a little cabin in the woods, or a little condo in the city, right? There's a lot of ways this could go. So what kind of led you to want a simpler life? And we'll start there.
Coming from California, the Bay Area, I just moved from there.
Okay.
Knowing what people pay for homes and their monthly payment, that seems a little paralyzing to want to sign myself up for 30 years of $5,000 a month.
Whoa.
So right off the bat, that's something. So that made me want to discover more of the country, see other places.
Yeah.
But even then, the idea of having your residence be quaint and small. I don't need that much space. I've shared rooms. I have had my room my whole life. I'm in a little studio now. And having that maybe on a nice plot of land, maybe close-ish, maybe 45, 50 hour away from a city, something like that really appeals to
Yeah.
me because I think I could have almost the best of both worlds. Get
Mhm.
away from paying a couple grand, maybe 1,000 on the low end, probably not 1,000,
Yeah.
a couple grand to live versus having a nice place that I own. And then it allows me to really, it opens up my life. I'm not working to live.
Yeah.
I've found a way to have to, I would say, secure a certain standard of living.
Yeah.
And I love to travel, and it opens up a life like that.
Yeah. And you said you're 23 right now?
I'm 23, yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting because like I was literally the same age when I was like, you know what, this is no, I got to do something different. Um, and mine was the Great Recession. That's what kind of kicked off my thinking, and I'm sure you've thought about some stuff with the pandemic, of course. Um, but I was kind of edging there anyway. It was just that was the catalyst, and I'm sure things like that happened with you. So yeah, I think like the things you just said like come up a lot for people, especially like your generation, my generation. Like we don't want to get stuck in these mortgages. We don't want to just spend all of our time working and not enjoying life. You got to pay the bills. You got to be an adult, right? Like there's responsibilities, of course, but the idea of like 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, only to retire at 65 if you're lucky, is just not appealing. So I would say, first off, it's totally possible, right? Because when I was your age in the exact same city that you're in now, my rent and utilities was about $1,500. After I built my tiny house, it was $15, right? So I could literally work like a few minutes at a job and pay my bills. Like I could walk down to, like a McDonald's, and I think now they pay $15, right? Like so, yeah, it's certainly possible, but it takes a lot of work, and I think a lot of discipline also because it was years before I was able to achieve that. Um, but it was like a positive feedback loop because I would get into it and then like I like saw some benefits and then I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And then it kept the motivation up and things like that. So when you think about the life you want to build, you mentioned like travel, you mentioned obviously like not having to work crazy hours. What other elements of this life that you want to build do you think are important to you?
And I'll back up a little bit. It's not just an
Yeah.
affordability thing. It's not, oh,
Mhm.
I need to do this or think I'll need to do it. I think
Right.
that I would be able to find a way to have a nice house, pay a mortgage, all that. I think that the life is, and this will go right into this question.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun way to connect with nature in a little, in a way too. I have a hard time. I've never stayed in a place that's 150 square feet, which it seems like that's what you live in. That kind of scares me a little bit, living in a converted bus or van. So something that's a happy medium, I think that would work for me to where really I would have my own place, a little quaint little oasis, call
Yeah.
it mine, not too far out of town, wherever that may be, and just have a garden, all that fun stuff that being in the city you don't even have, or even having probably about the same square footage as I would desire to have outside the city.
Right. Yeah. So what other elements of this life that you want to build do you want to make sure to incorporate?
I want to. I just want to be in a position where I have a flexible life. I
Yeah.
would say that's the number one thing. Flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm in the stages of almost, it feels like planning my life. I had a job for 2 years and obviously no, nothing goes to plan. So you just kind of do things and make it work. But I had 2 years at a job in the Bay Area, quit that, moved out here. And so right now I'm at an interesting point in my life, inflection point it almost seems, where I'm in a new city,
Mm-hmm.
other coast. I'm looking for jobs. So even from a career perspective, I have an idea what I want to do, and actually I think I'm going to pursue that and go after it. But I still don't have it. There are a lot of things I can do. So it's a flexibility thing, and frankly, I don't really know much more than that because I haven't lived it at all.
Yeah.
I'm in my discovery phase now.
Right. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's so funny that you talking like just echoes what I sounded like back then, because flexibility was a big thing for me. I wanted to be able to work remotely, and that was in a time where that wasn't very common, right? Like now it's definitely more common. Um, so yeah, I think being able to like think it, think through things, and then the one point I did want to make is like when you are thinking about like kind of the place that you want to live, one tip I like to give people is like try it out for a weekend or like a week or something. So Airbnb is a really good option for this, right? Like you can find places that are X number of square feet or in this city or in this little town that you're
Mm-hmm.
considering, and you can go try it for a weekend or a week. And if you have a remote job, especially, you can just go work there and see what it's really like. And you may be like, huh, okay, 600 square feet is just way too small. I thought it was going to be okay, but but I think 800 could be. And then maybe you go test that later on or something like that. Or a certain like little town that you like, and you may realize like, oh, maybe I actually need to be 30 minutes from the city instead of an hour, right? Like you'll start to kind of hone in on it. And I think one thing that people do is they don't take enough time to like jump. They jump into it and they don't test enough. And I think like with options with Airbnb and now how many tiny houses are available or other
Mm-hmm.
weird kind of fun like shipping container houses, tree house. I mean, you name it. Like any house that you would potentially want to get into. I'm not sure if the Boxable is, but I wouldn't be surprised if a few of those, pop on to the scene here in a little bit. So yeah, you can try all those things. And then the other point I want to make from what you said was when it comes to flexibility, one of the best things that I've found is that if you're not financially tied to something that or if you're able to get ahead financially just enough that you can say no to like a job specifically, like that's where I think people really get tied into it, is like they they have to make money, they're living paycheck to paycheck, um, maybe they're living right up to the edge of their means, then they have to go to that job. And I knew when I near the end of like before I like went full time with the tiny life, um, I was in this point where I was like, hey, my bills are so low, right? $15 a month plus some food and a little bit of gas, right? Like it was nothing. And I had a employer that frankly was just being really unethical. And I was able to be like, listen, I'm not comfortable with this. And if you're not okay with that, then I can head out. It's okay. Right. And like that really threw them for a loop because they're used to being like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I sign your paychecks and like your life depends on that. So yeah, I think with the best way to get flexibility is to be financially, and it doesn't mean you have to be rich. it just means that when you do make money, that you live below your means, you save, you get out of debt, and that your cost of living, your bills your overhead is low. And that combination, and then what's interesting about that is then you end up being happier, and then being happier usually leads to income growth just by its own right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, there we go. So yeah, like just being happy leads to income growth, and then you don't have to work as much, and then you get a little bit happier, and then it's like, oh, it's a nice little cycle there. So okay, so we talked a little bit about the lifestyle now. What specific questions did you have? I know you had some.
Mm-hmm. I think this question that's pertinent to me, but I'm in a similar spot. So you've been living in a tiny house since 2012. I don't know if you started living in one in 2012 or started building.
Mm-hmm.
Been one for quite some time. What I think maybe there's some obvious answers about what you'd miss.
Yeah.
But what are some things that you, until you really started living, like let's say 10 days in, 15 or even later, you went,
Yeah.
oh wow, it could either be one, an inconvenience, or just two, different.
Yeah.
Or some things.
I think the two biggest things for me that stood out is I trying to have some guests stay who are like friends that would visit for the weekend, and like we made it work, and we're good friends. So like we've gone like camping, so like we crashed in tents before, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But it wasn't practical, right? So like a guest room option would be a nice thing if you could work it in, and it doesn't have to be big, or it could be your office, right? And then you just like have a Murphy bed or something like that for those times that someone that comes. The other thing, well, there's one more. I think if I were to do it all over again, I would go with a bigger tiny house and put the bed on the ground floor. So no lofted main bedroom, maybe a lofted guest bedroom or something like that. But just going up and down a ladder, like I'm so used to it now. Like I can literally do it in my sleep. Like it's really kind of incredible. Like if I have to go to the bathroom, I like get out of my loft, down a ladder, walk to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, climb up, and I'm asleep in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's like a lot of physicality, yeah. So, and we're both younger, so like we don't have the mobility issues that like some folks have, where they're not sure if they can make it up and down the ladder. But yeah, I would say a ground floor, making sure that bedroom's nice and easy and accessible. And then this is maybe a personal thing, but I think I would like to have a garage. And not so much that like our climate here requires that like we have a car and a garage. It's just a convenience thing. Like it's nice when your car isn't freezing cold or covered with snow, that if it's raining, you're able to get out of your car. A garage is also really good for some bulk storage of things that you don't like to keep in your house, right? Like a good example is I built my house, so I had all these tools. I don't really want a circular saw and all the dust and everything in my house, right? Like, so there's certain things like your bike and all that would be nice to have in a garage. So just some storage space for car and some tools, and then a place where I could like back out the car and set up my tools to do woodworking would be a nice thing. That's kind of the woodworking bit's kind of a personal interest of mine. But I think it still stands. Like you need a place to put lawn equipment and what those kinds of things. And a garage can be pretty affordable to build. So even if it's detached, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think those are the three things that I would change. I initially wanted a flush toilet, but I got a quote from a plumber for the distance that I would have to go, and it was $50,000. And I was just like, okay, well, that's not going to happen.
Would it be solid gold? Would it be gold plated at
I
least?
know,
If
right?
not
Jeez.
solid.
And and so then I ended up going composting toilet, and I thought I was not going to like that at all, but I ended up. It doesn't bother me. So honestly, like I'm on the go and doing work and things like that so much that like I'm usually like out and about at a coffee shop or at my co-working space or something like that. That it's not a big deal. So yeah, like a composting toilet ended up being fine for me. The price was certainly right. It was like $10 for the bucket and the little lid thing, and that served me for years. And then I'm trying to think of other things. I think that's about it. Yeah, those are the big ones that stand out to me.
Okay. So it seems almost like at some level it is just the inconveniences are the obvious. You don't really have. So
Hmm.
I'm just curious now that you've built your tiny home. I think I saw a rendering, a map of your site.
Yeah.
It looks fairly large or large enough maybe you could put a garage. Are there any restrictions now that you've gotten, I assume, your tiny house approved to build a detached garage? Is that
Mhm.
like you can't do that anymore?
I
Or do
could.
you have the
Yeah.
option? You could, okay.
Yeah. So where my tiny house is it's on a friend's land, and I don't actually
Okay.
own the land. Um, I've been there for a long time. We get along really well. He loves having me there. But it's also borrowed ground, right? So there's a level that I'm willing to spend for convenience, but it's still under a threshold that I'm willing to walk away if he says, "Hey, I need to sell the land," or I'm going a different direction or something like that. Like I had to put in the water line because I needed water. I had to upgrade the driveway because I need to get in and out daily. Um, so that was, several $1,000s each. But like a garage, I've thought about it. But I haven't pulled the trigger. I have enough space to do it. But yeah, that's something to consider. If you own it, then that's not an issue, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask about your neighbors, but it sounds like you have a pretty good situation, a pretty good neighbor. So
Yeah.
maybe the